And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather again showing this strong frontal system pushing slowly eastward toward the Bering Strait, bringing strong winds and precipitation up into the Chukchi Sea and really weakening down here to the south now. And we'll see for tomorrow, the system pushes inland. We've got the high surf advisory out for the St. Lawrence Island area, Bering Strait coast, and the winter storm warnings out up here in the northwest areas, especially on the southern slopes of the Western Brooks Range along mountains. Could see 6 to 10 inches of snow, winds gusting to 45 miles an hour there. Different story off to the east and definitely to the south here with dry conditions, light winds. Pretty windy over the northern panhandle tomorrow, actually tonight into tomorrow, and then that lightens up but stays dry and sunny down there. And on the chilly side for Tuesday, dry and light winds across southern Alaska. Not really too bad even in the northern interior here, just a few scattered snow showers possible. And that front, this is all that's left of it up there in the central Arctic coast. Maybe some light snow there at times. And weak system out over the western Bering Sea. This one, at least initially, staying down to the south. And the coastal water forecast, we'll start up here, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, north winds increasing to 30 knots with gusts of 45 knots. We've got gales in Stevens Passage. Northwest winds increasing to 35 knots, northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. And along the coast of Prince of Wales Island, north winds 15 knots. And the central coast here, small craft advisories, northeast 25 to 30 knots, seas up to about 8 feet. And some gales here for the north coast, northeast 30 to 35 knots. And for Tuesday, winds coming down here, Lynn Canal down to 25 knots, still from the north at 25, seas 10 feet. Northwest at 30 for Stevens Passage, north 15 for Clarence Strait. Small craft advisories for the south coast, northeast at 25 knots, seas 7 to 8 feet. And central coast, northeast 15 to 20 knots, down to 10 knots on the north coast from the north. Prince William Sound tomorrow, as well as the North Gulf Coast. Northeast winds 15 knots, seas running 3 to 5 feet. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, north winds at 20 knots. Cook Inlet, north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. Tuesday, variable winds for northern Cook Inlet as well as Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast. Light variable winds at 10 knots. Also for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, southern Cook Inlet will be the windiest area here with northeast winds at 15 knots. Kodiak Island, northeast to northwest winds for the day Monday at 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. Variable winds 10 knots here for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, right up into Bristol Bay with only 1 to 2 foot seas. East winds 20 knots on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. And then for Tuesday, 30 knot easterlies here, south side of the Alaska Peninsula, Bering Sea side, east-southeast 20 to 25 knots. Bristol Bay looking at an east wind at 15 knots with those seas still only 2 feet. And Kodiak Island, variable winds 10 to 15 knots. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, east to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots. South to southeast winds at 15 knots. Pretty light there for Adak and Atka. And for the Western Aleutians, we'll see west winds at 15 to 20 knots. So those seas out there running 6 or 8 to 10 feet. And then for Tuesday, south to southwest winds 20 knots. Western Aleutians 6 to 11 foot seas. East winds 20 knots for Adak and Atka with 5 to 8 foot seas. Small craft advisories for the Fox Islands. East winds 25 to 30 knots. Seas running 7 to 13 feet. For the southwest coast here, Kuskokwim Delta coast, south winds 20 knots for the day on Monday. South 25 knots there for the Yukon Delta coast and 30 knot southerly winds in the forecast for Savunga, Gamble, or St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Southwest 30 knots, 17-foot seas for St. Matthew Island, Pribilof, south winds at 20. And the day Tuesday, east winds 20 knots for St. Paul and St. George, southeast 20 there for St. Matthew Island. Same forecast here for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. Yukon Delta, south at 15 knots, Norton Sound, and St. Lawrence Island, south winds 20 knots, 4-foot seas. Good gales here tomorrow for the Chukchi Sea, actually from the Bering Strait northward there, 40 to 45 knots from the south-southeast, seas running 10 to 13 feet. And small craft advisories for the western and central Arctic coast, south winds in these areas 25 to 30 knots. Winds becoming lighter as you head east all the way down to 10 knots over toward Barter Island and Demarcation Point. And then those pick up small craft advisories, west-southwest, 25 knots here for the all of the Arctic coast here, southwest or west-southwest, 25 knots, 5 to 7 foot seas. And the Chukchi Sea, lighter winds in store for Tuesday, southwest 15 to 20 knots, seas 4 to 6 feet.